Welcome to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and I help deeply caring equestrians create emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. This podcast is a safe place for anyone who desires a better future for horses and for the equestrian lifestyle. I hope that you will enjoy these solo and collaborative episodes where we enjoy a deep insight into our horses' worlds and ways in which we can make that better for them. If you love horses and are willing to do right by them, you're going to love this podcast. And I thank you for being here. Oh, guys, you are not ready for this. Shannon Beahan. Shannon Beahan's on the pod, everyone. I don't want to sound dramatic. I don't even want to be hyperbolic. But Shannon might be my favorite horse person and horse trainer that is working right now. Not only do Shannon and I see eye to eye, not only do we have a long history of respecting each other and collaborating, and we have always been the same with each other, but we both bring a very unique set of tools to exactly the same ethos in horsemanship, meaning that when she and I speak, it's not an echo chamber, even though we share so much in common and see so much eye to eye. And that's why I'm so proud to present this conversation. In a world full of people looking in the mirror with others and seeing only themselves in others, I don't see myself in Shannon, and yet we are so alike, and I want you to hear this in this conversation. Shannon is the woman behind Humming Horse on Instagram. She lives on Vancouver Island and is a trainer and instructor to folks locally and online. She has a glorious online course that we speak of in this episode, and she is someone I consider a friend. I absolutely adore her. This was such a refreshing conversation for me, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear it. Here we go. Here's Shannon of Humming Horse. Good. Shannon, hello.
Hello.
It's my pleasure to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
This is how I feel about Shannon Beahan. Beahan or Beahan?
It's actually Beahan, but we accept all variations.
Well, I like to make sure I'm not calling people out of their name. So Shannon, I feel like this is maybe a weird thing to say, but my awareness of you, we haven't met in person yet, but I feel like when I meet with you, it's like I'm meeting with like a buddy I went to war with. I don't know why I have that feeling. It's kind of like I've been such a fan of your work, and I think the feeling's been mutual. And it's never been about leverage. It's never been about competition. It's never been at any level us being confused of the other. It's always been, oh, I get you 100%. And it's been a few years now like this. And you've had this journey on social media where you dip in and dip out. And when you dip out, I'm like, you go get that dip out, girl. You get that dip out, girl. I wish I could just dip. Like, don't we all just want to dip? And then you dip back in, and then you're like, mic drop, mic drop, mic drop, mic drop, and then you dip out again, and it's just fabulous. I think it's fabulous. I just adore you. I really do adore you.
Thank you. Well, I think there's something to the comrades in the trenches. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll do a past life thing, because from the moment I first kind of encountered your material, it was actually unsettling a little bit, because it was so trippy how much it felt like it was coming from my own interiority.
Right.
But not to the point of like, this is like an exact thing of what's in me. It had a different resonance, but it felt so familiar to my own extremely detailed inner thought processes that I was like kind of tripping out.
Yeah, and that's been my experience too.
I still do. And so really getting to know you and your material is more than just what is in the content. It's like, what's even going on in the collective as some of us whatever we want to call ourselves, alternative horse people, come to the surface and create global communities. What's going on with these like karmic threads of those of us that like, did we know each other in a past life? Like, what's going on here? So I feel that resonance with you, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a war zone situation in the past.
I wouldn't be surprised either, but like I need to lean into the contacts that I do have, like yourself, because in this late stage capitalist hellscape we live in, it's as my socials went above 10K across the board, there's been a shift. Like, for example, this week I made like an offhand post on my phone while I was in a cafe, just off a secondhand thought I had in my head about spring. I was like, look, spring's coming. The nervous systems are more elevated. Your horses are synthesizing protein. We all need to back off of our horses right now. And in the Southern Hemisphere, same thing, just flip that upside down. We all need to back off our horses. And then I just sort of rattled off like a very loose checklist of, things we might want to consider. If you deworm, this is the time to deworm, just avoid ivermectin, because I thought everyone knew that there's global ivermectin resistance in parasite populations. I thought that was just like common knowledge. Anyway, it was this kind of like, I thought, fairly innocent post about springtime. And the number one takeaway in the comment section was ivermectin. It became the ivermectin post. And I'm just like, where were people not seeing, feeling, understanding that I wasn't writing about ivermectin? Or is there a cultural shift in social media where people read stuff, watch stuff solely to feel about what can I take away from this, rather than how can I understand this?
Should I reflect on this?
Please do. Please do. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to take it because there's so many cool things we could talk about. So, and this isn't really one of the ones I want to spend a long time on, but I've been writing a lot about this with myself and more that I'll post, but around, what I call fast information. And so to be sympathetic to the people that annoyingly glom on to some kind of supercharged word like ivermectin and then run with it when that wasn't
the thing,
the impulse of it wasn't the thrust of your post. To be sympathetic to them, I would say that like this is one of the byproducts of fast information, and have just been like we're flooded, to use a term we know with horses. We're flooded with information, and not everyone has the supercomputer brains that you and I have. And I don't say that as something to brag about, because it's as much a hindrance as it is a gift. But so that just means that the supercharged words float to the surface and give the emotional hit, whether it's a positive emotional hit or a reactive, aggressive emotional hit. And they maybe don't have the skills in close reading, which is actually one of the things I've been really thinking a lot about lately, that goes hand in hand with the growth of this ethical horsemanship, whatever we want to call it, community, which is to be, part of this community is growing online. That's not just like the onlineness, the digitalness isn't just some added layer. It's what enables this connectivity for someone like you and me to be talking right now.
Or working.
And what's that?
Or working, making
together.
A living.
Yeah, exactly. And so to me, as much as I personally am not really excited about developing relationships with machines, or just like digital information, hyper information flows, I do still think we need to take that kind of soft, slow, careful, attentive listening skills that we bring to our horses and bring it to the media to also do the best service to these relationships. Because I get caught in it myself. Like, I do see this little community that has grown online as community.
Right.
Even if it's disparate, even if the threads are tenuous, I still see it as community. I'm able to grow my kind of courage around these methods, whatever word we want to put in there. I'm able to grow it partly because I know this community exists and I'm not alone with making some of these moves towards better treatment of horses.
That's so
And
interesting.
so that means that if I come across content, even from someone that I really respect and like, but they say something that I maybe perceive as inflammatory, and that I want to react to them or like push them away or kind of label them as, oh, you're in that camp. Oh, you're one of these people. I'm really being aware of how I perceive these members of my community, quote unquote community, and to like just slow down my perceptions of them, because it's also lightning fast online, and online reduces our identities down to very
Buzzwords.
one-dimensional, buzzword things. And we ourselves might make use of them, thinking that we're befriending a certain community and not knowing that in using that
Right.
term, we're also alienating a certain community.
Yeah.
And so I'm for my own practice trying to three-dimensionalize the people in this community,
Right.
even if they say a word or
Right.
drop something that triggers
Right.
me, because I'm like, they matter to me.
No,
they really
of course
do.
they matter. It's never my intention to trivialize or minimize this kind of thought pattern. And I think it is important because we are so much in the online space and the digital community growth around horsemanship. I just watched the comments section roll out on that post, just quite detached and rather curious. I'm like, isn't that curious? Isn't that curious? I thought, interesting, curious. And then there were other comments of people coming in who were at a different level. And I thought, I wonder if these people have the same approach to their horses. I wonder if people have the same approach to their horses. It is curious to me. And you mentioned a little earlier that you show up in this way, knowing and feeling buoyed by the fact that there is a community that you're here to serve, represent, and partake in. Partake in.
Yeah.
When I started my pathway into horses, I can't remember, maybe I'm looking back with rose-tinted glasses. I personally can't remember looking for community. And I know that a lot of people do, because a weird analogy, but when I was 18, I was living in Zurich in Switzerland. And I kept saying to my friends at the boarding house, I'm like, let's go see a movie on the weekend. Let's go relax after school. And everyone would go, yeah, we should go see a movie. And then when it came time to get out of the house and go, no one could summon the motivation. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and there I am on the other side of the world, reforming my identity as a young person. I was really like being born again, moving to Europe at 18. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, Lockie, if you want to do anything with your life, you need to stop expecting other people to join you as you go there. If you want to do anything with your life that you're drawn to, never allow others, no matter how much you love them, to gatekeep that experience for you. And so I was like, I'm going to go to the movies. So what did I do? 18 years old, hands shaking, went to the cinema by myself in Zurich, bought a thing of popcorn and watched Avatar, like 2008.
It's a worthy movie. Yeah.
Worthy movie. So, and since then I was like kind of inhabiting this very solo role. And it was the same when I entered into horsemanship. There was no one to my left and no one to my right that even had access to horses. I was like, I just love them. I can't wait for someone else. I need to find mentors. I need to find access. I need access. But whether someone else is coming with me or not, fine for me. And it is such a mindfuck at this point in the game to turn around and be someone who's creating a community. In the last 9 months in particular, creating a community, I'm still trying to come to terms with that.
Well, what you just described would be the kind of person that would be able to carve out that kind of space because you're not waiting for the rest to catch up.
I'm not.
And part of this thing that I'm calling community is even like layers of divestment for me of, like I've made kind of evolutionary shifts with how I relate to the horses. But the missing piece that's coming to me in like more recent years and maybe even months is the other pieces around my relationship with other horse people. and the ways in which, I can relate to what you're describing around that independence, because there's definitely a side of me that is not waiting for anyone either. But the truth of it is, if I'm really to sink into my heart, is like, I want it to be a big party. Like I want a bunch of us.
You got a dog management problem?
How do you know? The partner's supposed to be watching the dog and she's scratching at the door. Is that okay? Can I?
Of course it is.
Okay, I'm very sorry because I won't be able to pay attention.
I'll only leave it in as #relatable content. So go
okay,
deal.
Good.
Go
good,
deal.
Good. Relatable content. Now guess what she's doing.
What?
After I opened the door. Just relatable content.
Come back in?
No, what do? You open the door and then she's just standing there with the door open. So we'll let it be. And she's walking away.
So she was a cat in a past life, is what you're saying?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just this piece around like, I can move forward with my own way of working with my horses. I have not let the lack of other people in past years that are in the same vibe as me, I have not let that hold me back. But sinking into my heart, I do want more community. And also, along with that little line of independence, there's a little tinge of resentment for all the people along the way that I've had to create my own path for because they were XYZ towards horses, and I'm trying to divest whatever we want to call that resentment, that defensiveness, that superiority in me that thinks I'm somehow better because I've chosen this. But I'm really trying to divest that because there's little versions of that in the people I serve. Like they're not coming to me because they've made the full transition into a more, well, some of them are, but some of the people that come to me are still a little bit of that other kind of horse person that I long ago separated from. And it's like, how can I serve them if I haven't really examined the sides of me that still holds resentment towards them, defensiveness towards them, like I say, superiority towards them? I'm really trying to deal with that more subtle edge that's inside me that has caused me to become something different. And they're kind of the shadow side of that, because I don't want my voice going up into a certain pitch when they repeat the phrases of the kind of horse people I wanted to leave behind. I don't want my heart rate to start racing and my body to clench as they say these things, and then their horse to notice and their horse to go, wait, I thought you were so soft and open. What just shifted? And me to have to paint a smile on my face and force myself to take a deep breath. I want it to all be able to flow through me easily so that I can serve the horses better. Does that make sense? Or is that like
this is why
it's
why I adore you, because you have invited, by your demonstration, you just invited me and anyone else who's listening to examine our shadow self and examine the unexamined parts of ourselves. Part of my hyper independence, I will admit and tell on myself, is a trauma response. I was the bullied kid in high school who was made fun of for being queer and being different by boys and by girls, right? Yeah. I was the weirdo who had to find comradeship with whatever was left over after the cool kids had run their rampage socially through the crowd. So whatever the dregs were left, we kind of linked arms, right? And here I am 20 years later, a horsemanship instructor linking arms with whoever has been chewed up and spat out
Yeah.
by the cool kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'd categorize as like, and I say this with total affection and admiration, like freaks and geeks. Freaks and geeks are my, I passed as a normal person
Yeah.
for a lot of my youth. Um, but I was a teen mother. I was pregnant at 15 and gave birth at 16 to a biracial daughter who is now a grown-up queer biracial woman. And so, you know, on the surface I looked like a regular person, but I was not ever. And that became quite clear once I became a teen mom. Like it's quite an outsider position to be in high school breastfeeding on lunch break. It's
Wow.
not the normal path. And it was very clear to me at a young age that I was never going to be able to follow the normal milestones that even a white straight girl would, and so there's a whole bunch in that around just being hyper alert to power dynamics for all any number of reasons, not just for the big systemic power dynamic reasons. We had a lot of strife in my home growing up. A friend of the family described us as a family of alphas. He said, I've never met a family where everyone in the family is an alpha. And I was like, whoa. But I was the baby of that family. So it's like by 5 years. And it's like, how could I have been one of the alphas? Like, if I was a alpha on the surface, it's because I was having to fight for my life from a very young age within my family. Bless you, family. I love you. I forgive you. But this dynamic of just being aware of how power operates in a very visceral way in spaces that are supposed to be safe spaces, in coming from people who say they love you, is something I've always been alert to, and always like the subtle trap of power of the people who say they're here to protect you, and there's something else. And I forgive them because I do understand a lot more about trauma now. But I also know how insidious both trauma dynamics and power dynamics can be, and that it's a constant excavation process within myself. Like the idea of like, I've been looking into my trauma is not a one-time thing. People tell these stories of like the dark night of the soul. I'm like, you had only one of those? Or like, I had my spiritual awakening. It's like, you're one.
Just one?
Like, I've lost track of all of these things. And so this thing I'm talking about, this very specific shadow side that appeared the moment I diverted from the mainstream equestrian community towards something different, was kind of installed in me, and I wasn't that invested in exploring that because I was too busy just exploring my relationship with the horses and trying to give them something better. But a lot of that was still informed by, there was a little princess in the pea thing. There was still a little burr under the saddle. And I'm by no means done working through that. But I want to give it a name just because I feel like I'm getting so abstract with it. But it's my relationship with mainstream horsemanship and mainstream horse people and their values. And I'm really trying to soften, which does not mean forgive them. It doesn't. This isn't even about them.
Right.
This is about me and my body.
Right. I get it.
This is about me and serving the horses that are still in the care of these people.
I get it.
And how can I be in conversation with them in a way that doesn't just reignite new fights and relayer old traumas?
It's so delicious. Usually I start these, I'm just calling this the prologue, but usually I start it with a question, but
Oh, okay.
With you, it's elsewhere. Yes, Shannon, I mean, 1000% love this. I mean, you and I had a couple of years ago, which for me is about 5 lifetimes ago. We did a 3-part collaboration where we discussed trauma, and I loaded it onto my video library, my Patreon. It's still there for anyone who would like to see it. At the time, I was living with my boyfriend, 3 dogs, and 3 cats in a 40 square meter studio apartment in one of the highest villages in Spain. And I was the only place I could record with you was like on the patio, and I had to do it before the weather got bad. So I was like pushing you at the end of the summer to get an appointment. Anyway, it's all still up there. So I feel like you and I have been discussing trauma for a while. And I love that you say that the journey isn't done. And the relationship with mainstream equestrians and wanting to soften ourselves towards it. I mean, yes. I mean, when I'm scrolling on Instagram or doom scrolling on Facebook and I see clips from the FEI, and I take a breath and I go, ugh. And then I read the words describing the video, and then I watch the video, and it's just like an episode from Black Mirror. And it's like we get these opportunities every day to choose our response. And I did comment because there are people who now ask me for my opinion on this, right? They say, we want to hear you weigh in. And my weigh in recently was the emperor has no clothes. This was the softest way I could put it. The emperor has no clothes. I'm not in the business, and I don't think you are either, of dancing around the truth and cushioning egos that are causing damage. We should never play into that. But at the same time, we need to find spaces where we can tell the truth. Tell the truth about what we're seeing and soften our relationship to it. I mean, when I crawled out from under my rock and started doing clinics, I was in cowboy country and someone came in with their horse and they were wearing big roweled spurs. And I went, okay, well, I'm on their territory. So what do I do with this information? I thought, how did they get through my walls? Right? Because I thought I had put in enough turnoffs that I would never be exposed to that. And yet I was exposed to it. And there was always a moment where I went, my inner child clutched his pearls and went, and then I had to take a breath and look up at this person on their horse and look at the horse and look at the person and watch the horse watching the person and watch the person watching the horse and say, okay, well, because you have chosen this tool, my standard now for your leg use is up here. With somebody else, if they were riding around toed out because their psoas and adductor integration wasn't in place yet, because their soleus hadn't conditioned and morphed around the horse yet, if you were toe out because you were still on process with your seat, I would say, not a problem for you to be toed out right now. This is a process of many months or years of repetition for your muscles to find parallel. But because you have chosen this tool, you don't get that luxury.
Love it. Yeah.
Toes in all day or spurs off.
See, I love this. And this is actually what I'm getting at, because, when I talk about softening my reaction to mainstream equestrianism, some people are going to hear that as go easy on them. Some people are going to hear that as forgive them. Some people are going to hear that as I'm an apologist to that, or I'm just a let's all hold hands kumbaya. And that is not at all. I'm saying that my own trauma education and process, which by no means do I want to imply I'm on some like high point of the mountain. I'm still in the nitty gritty of it. What it's shown me is that when you're in the trauma response, you don't have that many choices available to you when there's undesired stimuli. In this case, the undesired stimuli is the mainstream horse person that's showing you all the things you don't like about that world. You either fawn to it, you appease it, you
Mm.
join the group, or you get inflammatory and define yourself against it. And that defining yourself against it, I think, is an important start point. So if that's where people are at, and I don't even want to imply like if they're there for the rest of their life, that's great. Everyone's journey is their own journey. But I want to say, like, for those that are still feeling their way through this process of divestment, that the more I feel into the shadow realms and try and soften my reactions around it, you realize there's other ways of handling it that are far more creative and that don't just create new trauma responses. So you there, not even making it an ethical, like this, I love. You didn't make it an ethical judgment. You made it a physical, or I love to talk about like just the physics of two bodies. Let's even drop the ethics, even though the ethics is always driving me, but I know it's a hard sell for some people. Let's just talk about the physics. And so you made what would otherwise be an ethical judgment, hands on hips, like, how dare you bring spurs into my clinic? That's not what I'm here for. You had enough, like even in the retelling, you kind of had a contraction in your breath.
Right.
And then you took a breath. And in that space, you were able to choose another option, which was quite a creative option. So you're not telling them they can't. Because realistically, this is what happens with the horses too. Like we could be like, we're going to be better to the horses until they threaten our body. And if they threaten our body, then they're going to know. And it's like, okay, maybe depends on what the level of threat is, and how good you are at your moves. Or we could even say all reactions are okay. And it really just comes down to, and what are we going to do about it? Or maybe we're not going to put ourselves in this situation again. I just love the creative option you found. And like, I'd be curious, like, it doesn't have to be a good news story.
I have no idea if it went over well, because people are really good at smiling and nodding and inside creating a resentment. That does not belong to me.
Exactly.
That belongs to you. Your response to this is your response. I have chosen really the highest path that I can choose in this moment. But I will preface this by saying I just upgraded my pre-clinic online course, and in it is a section about tool use where I took about 15 minutes to describe let's prevent potential inappropriate tool use at my clinics. And I basically said, I have now made a decision. Please, no spurs at my clinic. It's just not necessary for my work. It's just not necessary. A lot of people use them for safety. I say, well, if you're not safe on the horse without them, let's explore why that is the case. A lot of people use them because they've got physical capacity issues. They can't reach the horse with the leg they don't have the muscle strength to whatever. Again, I would still say, well, let's explore ways we can help your horse be more sensitive to you without having a knife on the end of your heel. Let's explore ways the horse can become more responsive, God forbid, off a voice cue, God forbid. And not to be facetious about it, but to be facetious about it because, I need some humor too sometimes, or I'll go running and screaming into the woods.
And I'm not trying to be perfect around like, oh, the new ethical standard is you have to be like superhuman with your like, us as, leaders in the field being like just
we can be messy
superhuman. We can be messy. Like I just wrote a post. I've been trying to be very conscious about writing posts that are not inflammatory, but yet still get some of my really
big
points across.
Yeah, one recently was spectacular.
The one I wrote recently had a bit of fire, and
loved it.
For where I've been, of course,
loved it.
I know that I'll be supported by you if I do something fiery. But again, this isn't about them. This is really, for me, it's about myself and how my nervous system feels with it. Yeah.
Can I recount it? You had a reel that said, "Them, will you help my horse become safer to ride?" ? And then your comment down the bottom was me. No, but I will try to make you safer for your horse. Yes.
And, I sit with my posts before I post them and I'm like, so Shannon, is that true? Like, is this really how you approach your lessons? And it was like, absolutely. That had come from, oh God, I'm being too honest here, but I'll just go with it anyway.
This is
That
a
didn't
safe
come from
place.
an imaginary scenario.
It was
Like
a real scenario. It was a real
someone
scenario.
wrote me a long post that was basically to the effect of like, or a long message requesting my services that was recounting all the ways in which the horse is not safe for their daughter and how they want me to come make it safer for her to ride. Nowhere in there was the option of like, maybe we'll consider not riding for a period of time in an effort to, whatever. It was all about
what we want.
and right away, I started contracting. I started getting very upset. It's the kind of question that makes me just be like, I feel like I've made no progress in the community, that I'm still getting these kind of questions. I thought you said you went to my website. I thought you said you read my content.
Right.
I thought, like, how do you still think this is how I operate? That's the truth of it. I was having like kind of, not nice internal dialogue.
Yeah, you're having a wobble. You were being a human. You were feeling rage, which too many women pathologize their sacred rage. Too many women pathologize their sacred rage. Men pathologize it too because we're expected to lead with it. That's a whole other conversation. Too many women pathologize their sacred rage. Your sacred rage said, absolutely not. Here's why.
Here's why. And again, like this whole thing about, because the takeaway was, I can make you safer for your horse. And in that, I could then start proclaiming, and I get to that in the caption, and because you'll be safer to your horse, then your horse will be safer. But I'm even trying to drop these kind of assurances of like, if you're just nice to your horse, then they'll be everything that you wanted them to be.
Not necessarily.
Because then I'm just reinstalling an expectation in the community that you can have your cake and eat it too. And there doesn't have to be any sacrifices.
Yes, Shannon.
And it's like, no, like, because these are just this thing we call the late stage capitalist hellscape, which to me, capitalism is just an extension of colonization. And colonization is not something that lives in the past. It takes on new forms. These are logics of power. And I think one of my gifts is being able to track the dynamic of power when it takes on different forms. I think this is one of my gifts. But it's hard to explain it to people because they get so used to a sheep is a sheep. It's got wool, so therefore it can't be a wolf in a sheep's clothing because it's clearly a sheep. It's got wool and it goes bah. And it's like, do you see how that sheep walks? It moves like a predator. Do you see how it like moves in straight lines and holds a sharp gaze and is like looking like it wants to kill the other sheep? Can you not see that?
No, but
why are you so fooled by wool and bah?
We don't. My friend Laurie on her episode said, we want consent. We want to be able to drive up to the window and consent shoots out of the window like French fries. This is the place we are in. And that's okay for people to be in that space. And it's okay, Shannon, for you and I and others like us to be in this space we're in, being reactionary to that. We're not allowed to weaponize our reactions, though there'll be an escape of gas sometimes, like a shook up soda bottle. It'll happen.
Because we're
human beings. Human beings. And so my POV is, if a client can't allow me to be a human being too, I'm not safe with them, and I deserve to be safe in my business also.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet I suspect, again, this comes back to me and myself and my own nervous system. When, because I was in the mainstream horse world for a long time, in like working student positions in elite facilities, there's still a part of me that when I hear certain words and I see a certain posture, and that a little bit gets frozen back to that state.
Right.
And so for me, if I get too reactionary and inflammatory in the moment with someone who's looking like that, I can't function.
It incites that like trauma in you. Yeah.
It does. And I have such a narrow margin of being able to just be serviceable.
Right.
And so I am both trying to stretch that. And the only way I can stretch it is by understanding what these kind of triggers do to my nervous system. So again, this isn't about me being like, this is the formula for everyone. I do allow myself my sacred rage. Remember, I came from a family of alphas.
Right.
It was nothing but sacred rage.
Right.
But my sacred rage is so cutting.
Mm-hmm.
If I let that out in a session, I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna be able to help myself, the horse, the community.
I so understand you. I so understand where you're coming from. And I will preface this by saying that I did not spend a long time in the mainstream equestrian environment. I've dipped in, dipped out. I dipped in and went, whoop, hard left, nope, out.
Beautiful.
Where I was always on the fringes, out in wilderness somewhere on trekking horses. Sometimes of a standard, sometimes not of a standard, or I was in the middle of nowhere at summer camps for natural horsemanship facilities. So it was always kind of in the woo, right? Or in the woods. So I've always been out there. So I'm able to step into a mainstream environment and see this stuff and kind of go, okay, and just like dip, but I don't have like a nervous system inflammatory response to it, except when it mimics some of the bullshit I experienced in the dance world.
Yeah.
Then I go, oh, you know
that flavor.
You are, and that's specifically onto the horses and less about the people then. So when someone is removing the horse's dignity in movement, I can have sometimes a volatile response to that I have to breathe through so that I can remain serviceable and of service to them. When I notice pain and the rescinding of that horse's ability to set a boundary around their pain and protect themselves, I can have a volatile response to that. I can also have a volatile response to despotic, totalitarian leadership modalities in and around horses. I can have a volatile reaction to that.
That one you're allowed to have a huge. I shouldn't say you're allowed. You're allowed to have a reaction to all of them, but to that one.
It's kind of like, oh wow, okay, no, and I think in this age of our critics criticizing people, quote unquote, like us, let's say the ethical circle and community. Our critics often say to us that we don't adhere to enough safety and boundaries with our horses, that we're boundaryless somehow. I think people like you and me need to step forward and say, in a public space, no, that pisses me off, and let me tell you why. No, I'm also capable of being steel as much as I'm capable of being a marshmallow. I had a intern come and work with me about a year ago. And after 6 weeks, she said, "You're a steel marshmallow." I said, "What?" She's like, "Working with you every day, waking up, going to work with Lockie and his horses, I feel like I'm on mushrooms every day. You are a steel marshmallow. You are strong and soft at the same time." And she's like, how do we, what do you think about? Yeah.
This is and I think this is too where you and I occupy a similar place on the spectrum being the far end force-based dominance modes. Some people I think I'm on the super soft side. I'm actually in the middle.
Yes,
you
are.
and
you
the middle
are.
being, I think my success comes from the fact that the horses know I don't want to say a hard edge as in and then a bad thing's going to happen. I'm just saying I have shape to me. They will, if they go exploring, and this is something I think a lot of people don't understand about horses. We have Temple Grandin out there telling people that animals see the world through images, which I think is really, to me, my experience with horses in particular is that the felt sense is the primary sense. They feel into space. They feel into their networked relations. And horses can feel in me, and I suspect this is very much the case with you, that there is both that softness, but that it's not an abyss of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be terrifying, to be in relationship with a being that just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes into infinity, because there is no beingness to that being.
Yes.
You know, like territories, like getting to know an environment, whether it's a wild environment or habitat. Like that's the first way you get to know it, is like, oh, what are the limits of my territory? Same thing with bodily relations. It's like, I can feel into you, but I eventually feel what is your shape?
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, the art of it is that when that other being feels into our kind of final edge, our non-abyss moment, that it doesn't come back and snap at them, that it doesn't cut them, and it doesn't rebound them in some violent way, that it's just the steel marshmallow. It's just kind of like, that's how I'm able to do the kind of freedom work I do. That freedom, what looks like freedom, is always informed by a very known boundary. Although for me, it's a dynamic boundary. And it can be dynamic because it lives in my body, and my body is a moving thing. This is very hard for both the dominance people, if we're just going to give them a label, the force-based mainstream people, because they are very shape. Like they are very bounded.
What they will also do is create a container for the horse to step into their form, into their space, into their shape, almost like a crocodile setting a trap, and then they'll snap back at them. They'll wait for the horse to make a mistake so that they can punish them. That's kind of what's happening there. It's like, let me lay the bait, and then when you come in, instead of saying, here's what you don't want to touch, don't touch the mousetrap. You don't even go near it. Let me create space around it so that we don't even ever have to think about it as a possibility for us.
Well, and me, I actually want them to engage with the boundary, because to me, that's the beginning of where the relationship is. It's the calling the seeking impulse out of them, engaging that seeking impulse to feel the edges of my contours. And yes, the edges of my contours are dynamic in the same way that like...
Theirs are.
Well, theirs are too, And there is a process of getting to, like... This is relational horsemanship. It's like, it's processual, it's dynamic, but it is not unbounded. But the boundedness doesn't live in some arbitrary Renaissance era aesthetic that we are like forcing.
You just said that. I make little noises when people go play, do a mic drop. Yes. Okay. That one. Bookmark that, circle back, continue.
Bookmark that. And then the other end of it is, again, the people that come to me thinking I'm just unbounded.
Right.
And get quite confused when the first thing I'm teaching them is boundedness.
Yes.
And I'm getting better the more I do my trauma excavations, the more I do my shadow work, the more I bring that new self to my own horses in experimentation, the better and better I get at making that boundary space so soft, which does not mean unbounded. And this is, you and I are talking in the abstract, but because you're both an abstract thinker and a dancer, and I feel like this is
absolutely tangible to me.
I hope people are keeping up with this.
Well, and if people don't keep up with it, that's fine. I mean, when I first started reading Kathy Sierra's posts on Instagram 6 years ago, I was like, what? You know that meme of the lady with the smile where it's like far away and then close, where she goes, the what? That was my response to Intrinsin when I first saw it. And I was like, she sounds real smart. I feel real stupid. Okay. And so I just sat with it. I didn't allow it to trigger an ego response where I said, she's condescending people. No, I didn't go there, because she wasn't. She's allowed to speak from her knowledge, and I'm allowed to not understand it. And I'm allowed to say, good for her, all that knowledge. Good for her muscle brain. Yes, I was allowed to have that. And then I remember the moment, like 10 months later, I'm tinkering with my horse, and one of her principles came alive for me in the dance. And I went, Oh, that's what she's talking about. Quick, Rolodex through the intrinsic social media. Quick, let me read that. Oh, I understand it now. Quick.
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, I understand it now. And so that's how learning is. It's layers and layers.
Embodied.
So if people don't keep up with us, it's not my intention to try and sanitize it for the masses. I mean, I once had someone, this was years ago, when I was still in Poland, unsolicited, drop me a line on my business page when I had, I don't know, tens of followers, and said, in my opinion, your posts are too long and people can't concentrate past the third sentence. So you need to do shorter posts with better, more exciting pictures so that you can get more income. Click me here to have a Zoom meeting, all those things, right? And it wasn't a bot. He was actually a human being in the same city as me who had somehow came across me. And anyway, I said, thank you so much. And this was when I hadn't had some of the experience I had. I said, but it is not my point of view to work with people who have short attention spans. So why would I want to advertise to people who have short attention spans? People will find me. They will. They will find me. And I need people with long attention spans because it takes time to impart these knowledges to them about the horse, from the horse. And the horses have long attention spans unless we constantly interrupt them with dopamine. They have long attention spans. So that's actually intentional on my part. I was speaking to Celeste Lazaris on the pod last week, and she talked about traveling horsewitch, the moniker traveling horsewitch. And I said, did you give that to yourself? She's like, no, that was actually gifted to me from a client who's since passed. And I was like, so it's like a legacy thing. And she mentioned very quietly, it would have gone under the radar in the conversation for a lot of people, but she mentioned very quietly that she had considered eliminating traveling horsewitch so that she would stop losing business over people who found the word witch a trigger. And she decided to leave it because she's got it as a filter, that it filters out anyone who has an inflammatory response to the concept of witch, male or female, are people who won't get along with her in her services. And having spoken with her, I think that's true. She is a powerful woman. She's so powerful that when we got on the Zoom, I was asking her about her internet connection and about her tech. I said, how's your internet connection? Blackout. My computer blacks out. And then we came back in and she was like, as if on cue, flipped her hair over her shoulders. And I was like, okay, let me just clutch crystal, in this conversation. Right.
Yeah.
This is, anyway, I adore you. I just adore you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. It's very nice to be held in your adoring gaze.
I love your intellect, but I also love what you do with horses.
Thank you.
One of the biggest, as an intellectual person myself, I get a lot of backhanded compliments of people who'll say, I really love your writing. I'm like, yeah, but have you looked at what I do? Because what I write about is what I've been doing. So I don't write about stuff that I haven't done. So I've seen your course that you have, the energetic hygiene course. It's cleaning up the contact zone. Yes?
Yeah.
It leaves no crumbs. It's exquisite. It's an exquisite body of work. And I remember it's due for an upgrade.
It's due for an upgrade. Yeah.
I
don't want to interrupt you. Yeah.
I remember the first time I looked at it, I circled back to you to have a conversation, which we did. And then I lost the fucking recordings. I've never been so angry at myself.
Where we talked about boundaries.
We talked about this. And I was like, Shannon, it impressed me and moved me to see someone like you embodying firmness with your horses in a fair way. And we discussed that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much I want to say around this. I want to, before we wrap up, make sure that we talk about, because I know when you're talking about like long attention spans, I'm also want to throw the word practice in and devotion, because I know in your interview with Lori, you talked a lot about this, and I want to make sure it's something I also jump in on. But then I also don't want to leave the boundary thing behind, because again, I think this is where you and I are similar. It's soft but boundedness, and this is So yes, that course teaches a lot about boundaries. It's due for an update, not in the bones. The bones are still solid. It's more in the demonstration.
Mm.
Uh, I love the term contact zone because to me, that's always what I'm interested in, is when two bodies come to each other,
Mm-hmm.
what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Like even just make that the place of study. Because when two bodies come together, do you lose yourself in the other body? When two bodies come together, do you withdraw from the other body? When two bodies come together, do they overlap and step on each other's toes and intermingle? And then someone resents the other because you step on their toes and now they're the enemy. And then these really other messy kind of things. What happens at the edge of the contact zone? And I have been a student of my own kind of like theorized organizational device, the contact zone. And the more I go into my own kind of organizing device concept, the layers that are in that boundaried place between the two bodies, and even what a person means by boundaries. We think we know what we mean by that word. Some people think it's a shield that you put up to protect yourself, to not let other things in. That is not what I mean by boundariedness. Boundariedness could even be like identity. Boundary could be bodily potential. What are the limits of your bodily potential?
Beauty. Do you know how many people use beauty as a boundary? Beauty as a boundary, as a smokescreen? Let's take a break. Today, we are so blessed as horse people. Unlike the horse industry 20, 10, or even 5 years ago, we now have so many options of so many different teachers, methods, and coaches to choose from for our horsemanship. Instead of telling a negative story of overwhelm, because we have so many choices to make, let us celebrate the fact that we now have choice. You get to choose how you want to train your horse. You do not have to train like the person to your left or the person to your right. You only have to deal with who you see in the mirror and the horse in your hands. If you would like to redefine your horsemanship so that it can be softer, quieter, and safer, and maybe even build for a future of deeply encouraging and fulfilling experiences with your horse, I'd like to invite you to do that with the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. The Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course is available for sign up at any time, and you get lifetime access. This is an essential starting point for anyone who would like to redefine their horsemanship with emotional horsemanship. In it, I teach theory and practical exercises that allow you to make a start with a horse formed on the powerful emotional phenomena of care and nurturance using body language rules that your horse already knows, and they just need to remember. In it, you can join over 1,000 students around the world also studying this foundation, and the course has an average 5 out of 5 star rating. I filmed this course during the pandemic with an iPhone 6 that had a cracked screen, and I hung it off an olive tree using a piece of baling twine. And yet, despite that fact, this course has caught on like wildfire and has helped transform the lives of so many horse people and horses around the world, and gave birth to my business. Because what I'm teaching there is not just marketing, it's not predatory, trying to take your money for no reason. What I'm teaching there is real, boots on the ground experience, something that has been so important to the development of my work and of my students, and I teach it there for you in a self-study form. I hope I can see you there, and I really help change your life with horses. Now, let's go back to our episode with my glorious, glorious friend and colleague, Shannon Beahan.
That you put up to protect yourself, to not let other things in. That is not what I mean by boundariedness. Boundariedness could even be like identity. Boundary could be bodily potential. What are the limits of your bodily potential?
Beauty. Do you know how many people use beauty as a boundary?
to like
Beauty as a boundary, as a smokescreen to hide behind. Are you kidding me?
right,
Like, if I
right,
make the horse as beautiful as possible, aesthetically and mechanically,
right.
I never, ever, ever have to have an identity here because the horse and what we're doing does it for me.
Right. Yeah, and this is even like using cultural concepts, whether they're like visual aesthetics or whether they're like an idea, to make yourself or the horse's body legible to a populace. Whereas like a
Such
lot of
as
what I do isn't
matchy
legible.
sets, matchy sets.
Sure. Yeah. Matchy sets, the brand name of gear, the trainer who you always identify behind, or even the discipline.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, this is legible to me. I know what that is.
Right. Like, let me give you an example. Tristan Tucker, who probably doesn't even know I exist or breathe in the world, which
He
is
must
fine.
by now.
No. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's a dog
Yeah.
and pony show over here. And I love it that way. Tristan Tucker, Australian, he's doing, pretty much straight up a version of natural horsemanship, packaged for the mostly competitively leaning, Euro dressage leaning, flavored world. But he doesn't wear a cowboy hat and Wranglers. He'll wear jodhpurs and a baseball cap and a polo. So therefore, the rope halter is suddenly like, oh, what a curious idea. Rope halter with what? Oh, how interesting. And he packages that for them and he wears the drag. He wears the costume. I mean, RuPaul Charles, he says, we're born naked and the rest is drag, and we all choose it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what does it mean to like, well, and that's when you realize how limited some of, when
it's not limited. It's not limited. I see these Trojan horse scenarios as really, really valuable and important. I want to make it clear. I love Tristan Tucker's work. Please, I'll co-sign it. How can I help? Can I shoulder some burden for you? Can I put my shoulder into the yoke for you? How can I help you? Because what you're doing for whom is something my nervous system could never. And he brings humor to this as well, and gets results. And he's got packages, and I love it. So like, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the tropes. I can have a sense of humor and a glint in my eye and my tongue in my cheek about the tropes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can support it as well. And it's fascinating to me because I know for sure, Shannon, that me, former professional classical ballet dancer, right?
Yeah.
I'm tall, I'm skinny, and people tell me that it's not difficult to watch me all day. That's what people have told me. I would never describe myself that way because I look at myself in the mirror and go, blah, because I'm a dancer. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Right? We go, blah, when we look in the mirror. If I wore patent leather black boots, this current season's jodhpurs, a polo, and I had not a scruffy mountain horse draft cross, but a warm blood or a thoroughbred. And I was in a matchy set and a cap helmet doing exactly the same work in that costume, but exactly the same work in that costume. I know that my career would be in a very different place.
Yeah.
I'm cognizant of that. And I've chosen not to go that route, even though people encouraged me to. Did you know?
Yeah. Just to expand business.
Why are you with that horse?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Why aren't you playing ball with...
Why aren't you?
Why aren't I playing with the tropes? Because I'm a contrarian. I always have been.
That's what it comes down to for me.
I walk upriver. That's what I do. And it's never, ever, ever been about aesthetics for me, ever. It's always been about how it's felt inside. I mean, I've had trainings with horses that on the outside looked like a catastrophe, but they just felt really good to me in the horse, and it felt really honest for where the horse was at. And I said, I'll take that. I'll take that every single time. And I never, ever wish to be a symbol or a construct to people, or a tool for
even
people.
if it made your life harder.
Yeah,
on
because
some level.
because I'd rather be myself. And
Yeah.
I've met people who are playing that role, playing that drag, and I've seen on their body the
Constraint.
metaphoric hand around their throat.
Yeah.
They've even, off the record, communicated with me at a more real level in a way which you would never see them do publicly, and have them speak with a self-awareness like Zorro, Shadow of the Night, about the disparity between what they're allowed to put out there and what their actual experience of it is. I've had very specific scenarios with people way up in this field, and I watched them go through that, and I went, I couldn't ever do that. My body won't let me.
Yeah, same. That's what it does come down to. Like, part of it is a contrarianness, but the contrarianness is coming from a space of just needing to carve into the normalcy, to carve into the dominant paradigm, a new space. This is coming back to like the freaks and geeks. When I was at the height of working in elite environments, which, to be clear, I was always the working student riding client horses. I wasn't the one competing in the coat and tails. I mean,
Right.
I competed, I for sure competed, but mostly I was riding high level horses to prepare them for rich clients to ride
Compete.
in the shows. But I had exposure to really nice horses, and I had an amazing coach, and had all the resources. If they weren't from my own finances, I could be riding nice horses in shows if I wanted to, either by
You had
leasing the
access
horses or
to
asking
stables, to facilities, to
to
wash
all that
racks,
stuff.
to arenas, to covered spaces to train, which a lot of us out here, freaks and geeks, don't
And
have.
hand-me-down boots and hand-me-down tack from the rich people. However, in that environment, I very consciously chose for my first horse to buy what we in Canada here called a Canadian horse, Le Cheval Canadien. It's our one, like, quote unquote native breed. And they're basically draft crosses. They're sugar bush horses. They pull carts. They're a lot of what North America was built on. Rugged little types of horses. And I went and bought one deep in Quebec, in French only speaking Quebec. And I bought one. And I just felt he looked like a Muppet. Like, he was a chunky monkey. Everyone was like, "What are you doing?" And he was allowed to stay in a stall. It was like one of the extra quarantine stalls that was left empty for when the German horses would get imported in. So he was allowed to have that stall. So he was like exiled. But he was he'd sleep in it at night, and he was in turnout all day long. He'd keep other dressage horses company through the day, Fraggle that he was. And I was very committed to this being the horse that I was going to bring up through the dressage ranks. And eventually he actually became an eventing and a show jumping horse. And I'd bring him to shows, and I would watch the looks as I'd get him off the trailer. Some people, like, dirty looks, people whispering, like, "What is that horse doing at these shows?" And I kind of took internal delight in it. Like, I loved feeling like a disruptor in those spaces, scraggly horse. And I also knew he was about to charm the pants off of everyone. I had a hand-me-down bridle from my coach, fancy tack at the time, hand-me-down to her, no longer good enough for her, but I was very happy to have it. And it had a German brow band. So it had the German colors on the brow band. And I had, I don't know what kind of saddle at the time. And I had hand-me-down breeches and, all the gear to at least do the drag, except I had a Fraggle Muppet horse. And once he was tacked up and I had him in the warm-up ring and, could get a horse round and could collect them and make them look like puffed up, powerful dressage horses, suddenly people would then come up to me and go, "What kind of warm blood is this?" And they were in love with him. Like, that's all it took, was to put the German brow band on, puff him up into that big, powerful frame, juice up his gaits. And they go, "Oh, wow." And suddenly they were all so interested in him. And it's like, "Oh, you fickle
Yeah.
That's how easy it is. Like, and I could have slapped a brand on him and said, he's a Gatineau warm blood. That's a Canadian reference. and then go, oh, wow, like, take my money, and it's
50K.
like, so
the emperor has no clothes. The
even when I
emperor
was
has no
in those worlds at its depth, I was still playing with these edges and was still very much a champion to the underdog and just playing with the illusion of it all. So I think we see here what you and I really have in common.
Yeah.
And I'm pathologically kind of stuck in this. It's not even contrarian mode. It's just championing, I don't know. It's not even championing the underdog. It's carving out alternative spaces to expand what is possible so that for my own selfish reasons, I don't have to feel so constrained.
Okay.
And therefore the horses don't have to feel so constrained.
My mind starts wondering, what's the evolutionary route to the human experience you and I are speaking to? Because I don't think what you and I are speaking to here appeared out of nowhere in only the lives of us or people like us. I think there's an evolutionary route to all of this. If we think of human evolution and the tribe, what was the function of a being like us in the tribe? What was our function? I call it sitting on a nail. A lot of people sitting on nails. They're uncomfortable. They're sitting on a thing. I'm speaking metaphorically, but imagine a group of the Neanderthals camping out in a shit cave. It leaks, it floods, it's exposed to the north. They've hunted all the game, but the tribe is so committed to sitting around that campfire and just making nicey nice, and but if we leave, we're going to lose. And you and I are like, dudes, we're sitting on nails. We have to get up out of here and maybe consider that their greener pastures might be elsewhere. Let us move. Maybe that.
I think it's even pre-social. I think it's evolutionary logic itself. And if we want to get more spiritual with it, it's consciousness always looking to expand itself. And I think in this current time, evolutionary impulses are in an unprecedented level of, we're in a time of hyper change, and there's an evolutionary necessity to innovate right now for the planet. And so I think there's a lot more of this, like you can go back to, there's he's a Latin poet, Lucretius, like we're going way back in time. And then there was a more recent book called The Swerve, based on this poem, De Rura Naturam, about kind of like these like the very beginning of phenomena, like these atoms falling through space, like before form even exists. It's just atoms falling through space. And it's kind of, they say it's a metaphor for free will. So they're all just falling through parallel lines through space, these atoms. And then one, for whatever reason, swerves and it collides with another. And then that collision, back to like the contact zone and boundaries, that collision is the beginning of a chain of events that creates diversity, that creates life. And this idea, like the question around it is, what caused the swerve? Like, what was the thing that birthed free will, that caused one of the thing that was like all the other things to become something else? And that is the great mystery. But while we might never know the answer of what caused that, we might just understand that that is how phenomena, that is how evolution and life is possible, is for a swerve to take place. And I am happy to be the one swerving. As opposed to the ones just falling in neat parallel lines that never intersect.
Yes, Shannon. I love that. I mean, there was a period in the early 20th century where there were a small group of radical behaviorists who postulated that free will didn't exist. They then went back on their words before their deathbed, thank goodness, but not all of us have caught up with that awareness. But there's also an aspect of, I'm aware that you and I, were we alive 400-500 years ago, burned at the stake. burned at the stake.
Or worse.
Or worse. I would have been, burned
Drawn
at the
and
stake.
quartered.
I mean, just this morning, I was trimming my rescue horse and Sureño just coughed once. And I went, And then I finished my trim, went into my stable, pulled down all my herbs, concocted a herb blend for the cough. There I was. Yeah. And I'm thinking, burned at the stake 500 years ago, because 500 years ago, we didn't need the people whose role in society was to expand consciousness. People needed consolidation. They wanted to bring it in around the campfire. Yeah. So the thought pushers were pushed out because it wasn't the time for us.
Yeah.
Here we are 500-600 years later, 2024, we're in this exponential growth. So the people around the campfire are looking to their left and their right going, you're no help to me. Okay, weirdos. What do we do now? What do we do? Weirdos, we're going through change. Give us a roadmap to follow, weirdos. What do we do during these time of change? Yeah. And we're here saying, thank you for not burning me at the stake. Here's the roadmap. And bless you on your way. I'm going to go back to my herbs now, right? That's what we're here to do. And if you also, in effective neuroscience, Jaak Panksepp, right at the end of his book, he has a really beautiful chapter devoted to the subject of consciousness. And for an emotional neuroscientist who mapped emotion and gave it scientific credibility and data, maps for something we have never seen before he saw it. He offered a few really interesting things which have kept me up at night. One was that though each emotional system occupies a part of the brain, and that part of the brain lights up with electrical activity when that feeling is felt, he was never able to find the origination point. When did the match spark? So he tried to condense it down and find which part of the brain was the spark that lit the area. He wasn't able to find a consistent origination point. That keeps me up at night. The other one that keeps me up at night was he said that it has been the misconception in the last 200 years that consciousness is for the higher beings only. So only through a complexity of biology could you have awareness of awareness. And he actually postulated that we should flip that on its head, and that there is data to say that first came awareness, then came everything else, behavior, emotion, everything afterwards.
Yeah. And on this subject of, you were talking about there was a time when people debated whether free will was really a thing. Just to be on record with my position about free will is, and even to differentiate from that Renaissance era idea of the discrete individual, like really the kind of work I do with horses and where my kind of leading edge is. And this speaks to the softness versus the boundedness and finding that perfect balance between the two. I am aware of something in me and in beings that is something we call agency, which is another word for free will. And I'm very inclined to make sure that the beings that I have any kind of say in their life, that the say I have is one that's trying to open possibilities for personal agency. However, to honor bigger life systems and even to honor where my own knowledge comes from, I am very aware that this thing called free will, this thing called agency, is not an isolated thing that just lives inside the being, that there are larger fields of awareness where bodies speak to bodies in ways that it's like, where did my idea come from? This is what trips me out about some of your work. I'm like, Lockie and I are on some, it's not like, I had that idea first and he's saying it before I had the chance to say it, or vice versa.
No.
Because I get so freaked out. I'm like, is he a bot that's inside my head? Like, how does he know? And then I remember there are field theory, is one way of saying it. Morphic resonance is another term for it. This thing of non-localized consciousness.
I was about to say, the word that was on my lips the last 30 seconds has been non-local intelligence, and then you said it.
That's exactly what it is. You know,
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with Alexa Linton, a mutual friend of ours, and
Yes.
the way this thing goes by different names, I don't want to thingify it too much, because as soon as it's thingified, people objectify it, and I think we need to let it be loose. But the way I was using the term with her is emergence, you know, bottom up sensory information that speaks through you. And some of that information that comes in through us is not necessarily our own. Because of the way Western consciousness has been shaped, you know, the way we're taught to think is that if I have an idea, it originated in me. But the more I go into body intelligence, and it's directly through the horses, I know this, although more recently, I'm having a lot more herbal, like plant life relationships, and even like landmass relationship, you know, interacting with my property. I realize how so much of what moves through me is not coming from me. And I'm not going to be quick to say my horse told me this, or the fairy in the tree told me this, because I think it's even more dispersed than that. So all I can say is, like, I had this insight, you know, and I won't necessarily name it as my own. I had this insight. This is more and more the stuff that I'm into. My best ideas, my best ways of moving with horses come from a place. It is not me. It is something that moves through this vessel. And by moving through this vessel, it's partly shaped by my Shannonness, but my boundaries are porous enough to let these other things in.
It's just exquisite. It's just like listening to you is just like pouring honey onto my tired brain. But
you know these things too.
That's why I'm so happy to hear it, because often I'm at the other end of the conversation, and someone will ask me, how can I know what my horse is feeling? And I go, oh, okay, roll my sleeves up, you know. Here's a horse, here's you, right? And you start, and every day, it's the discipline of this work for me so much more relates to being a dancer. Every day you start at the bar with the first step you ever learned. Every day, the discipline to start again at the beginning. I think what you're speaking to is reading the room. I mean, you know, the ability to read a room and to have your pulse on the collective consciousness. I mean, a lot of people sometimes say that my posts, when I write them or create them, they say, get out of my head. How did you, but it's because I'm genuinely trying to understand what others are going through, because I'm really not that into myself. I'm really not. I don't think I'm that interesting. I really don't. I'm way more interested in others, and I'm way more interested in horses than I am to look at my own mirror every day. I mean, this was why I was never going to be a dancer forever, because you have to look at yourself in the mirror every day. And at some point I was just like, can we just stop with this? Like, you know, and when I choreographed, I would just pull the curtains across the mirrors and say, guys, we need to be feeling this one, you know, stop making it look like something, you know. And it sounds like what you and I are talking about is really, you know, highfalutin, right? But it's really not.
It's not.
It's so not. Like,
it's actually the medium. It's a medium.
The first
of
language.
Knowing.
It's the first language. Yeah. So, like, an example. This was maybe 2 months ago. My ex-dressage horse Sureño and I have been slowly walking the walk since he came into my life. And bringing him home and taking steps together. It's just been the most fascinating unwinding with him, and it continues to be. And he's so engaged, and it's just beautiful. But I haven't trail ridden him yet. Now, I'm a trail rider. I'm a hoofer, right? I love my trails. Yes, I haven't trail ridden him yet. I know he had been trail ridden, but it was this. It wasn't. It wasn't this one. You know, it wasn't that one. And so I was like, he's not ready, he's not ready, he's not ready, he's not ready. And then one day, this was like 2 months ago, walked out of my house, halted him with no plan except to have a chunk of time with him, and looked to the figurative Lockie next to me and went, why is this the day I'm trail riding you? Why?
Right.
Where did it
right.
come from? And I went, oh, follow the feeling. And I went, quick, saddle on horse, out we went, round the block and back again, no drama. He was perfect. And
Yeah.
anytime I'm trying to like push,
Yeah.
when it doesn't feel like it's already a foregone conclusion, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. This is very much I'm working with a young horse and starting her. Her owners have been so gracious about allowing me to start the horse in exactly my process, like, and they
Beautiful.
even just like so hands off.
Love.
And like the day of first sitting on her was not a day where I was like, today's going to be the day. In fact,
No.
very actively. And it was so emergent the way the first sitting on her. When I sat on her for the first time was so not planned, like even down to like, I don't know, like from the time that I thought it to the time I was sitting on her, it would have been, I think, less than 2 minutes of like, it's happening now.
Mm.
And even less than that, because, you know, we had done a lot of mounting block work. And so we were already used to getting that close. And, you know, my big tell of whether I'm going to do it is like, so they can stand at the mounting block, but you can do that with positive reinforcement. You can do that with a clicker and treats, but that doesn't mean you have the kind of like soft musculature I'm looking for before I sit on them. Yeah.
Chefs. Yes.
And so
Yes.
they've got to also pass the touch test, which is also within what I call touch, is like a very sensitized energetic reverberation that I feel in my own nervous system for like, I have a lot of like reaction around mounting blocks, not couldn't necessarily because of traumas, because I still have a little kid version inside of me that's like, ooh,
this is so fun. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get on the horsey. And so I even have to like really kind of like work with that anticipatory escalation. It is joy, but also I think, yeah, I get adrenalized around horses in a good, like,
in a good way.
I have stoke. It's what we hear on the West Coast called stoke. I have a lot of stoke. It's like surfer, like, yo, bro, like, yo, we're gonna like get in the ocean, yo, you know, like that's, I'm a little bit, I have that side of me that's very excited. And that's probably why I have a high tolerance for if they do act up. Because for me, it's not fear. It's I can turn that nervous energy into joy. And it's a joy for the horse to have their fear transmuted into something more effervescent. But even that, I don't want on the first sit, I don't even want that joy effervescence. No. We want total non-reactivity. But the feel I'm looking for is it's not non-reactivity of like an inanimate object, because that would signal like some kind of brace or fear or disassociation that's going to haunt me. I got to feel in my hand as I do that stroke before I get on, because I get on the bareback. I've got to feel, it's like I just feel the circuit open up between their energy and my hand. But that circuit, if you could put a sine wave, like an ECG on it, you'd see that it's very smooth waves. That's my assurance that I'm going to be safe. And this is a much deeper kind of relational safeness. I also trust in things like I'm not going to get on it when I'm having a bad back day or a bad joints day, so that if I have to do acrobatic flinging off of the horse, which is why I do it bareback, I can quickly acrobatically fling off if things do get hairy. But with this horse, never. And so, to your point about Sereno and the first day on the trails, and it just coming to you from some other place. And even what is that other place? Like, this is where I'm reluctant to even say, she told me or he told me.
No.
Because I think it's even something more about the atmospheric. Sometimes I swear to God, I could make a study of what the birds are doing around key events with me and horses.
Like we have a group of crows that is frequenting our pasture every day because it's prime worm country out there. And I'm aware of how smart crows are. We also have storks everywhere, and we have like the African one. They come across, they nest, they build their nests on top of the telegraph pile. Yeah, they're huge. Wow. So, and eagles and owls as well. I mean, it's I so understand what you're saying. And what happened with Soreno and I, if I'm allowed to go a little deeper in that conversation,
love it.
it was not, he can now be trail ridden. Nope, not at
this moment.
all. Not at all. If I took him out to the forest like my Sani and asked him to canter, he would get brain fried. And a lot of these Andalusian horses, if you create that in them, that adrenal response in them, there's a deep ancestral echo in their nervous system that says, oh, once I'm adrenalized, I get stuck there. I've met those horses. I've had to work with those horses. They never come back from that place. And I'm blessed to have an enormous Andalusian who has a health history, which means I can't adrenalize him too much, but also who's got all the nervous system capacity to get real big, but is also exceptionally reasonable when you keep him within boundaries. And that day when I was like, why are we going out today? It was a 10-minute round the block. And it was more like Soreno is asking me to allow him to tell me that he's open for that too, because he'd been seeing me and Sani go out. And it was almost like he was curious. He just wanted to ask the question. He just wanted to say, is this for us too? And then we went out there and he went, nope, don't get that. Don't get that. This is fine. That's a question that I get. This I don't. And I went, okay, great. Information gathering. Thanks very much. Made dot points. I went, right, we'll circle back to this at another time. But I would never then take that and leverage that feeling into now I'm doing 5 days a week, 2-hour treks. I would never, because he's not ready. I would brain fry him. It's at another level of something. And because we've got wet weather, I've put it on the shelf now. But 2 nights ago, as I was letting them back into the track after dinner, he took himself to the exit of the farm and stood there, pointed at it like a bloodhound. At 8:30 at night, it was dark. And I went, now? No. Like he sent me the feeling of now we go. And I'm like, no, but this isn't the go because I can't, it's 8:30 and I'm exhausted. I can't. So, and there'll be times when we miss each other. And I think that's okay too.
Totally.
Ships passing in the night, we're allowed to, have that moment too. And if that sometimes means my horse joins me on a trail ride that they didn't really feel up to, I'm okay with that. And then there'll be times when they go a little bit too far and I don't want to go there. I mean, I had a trail ride on Sani when on the way home, instead of taking a beeline to home, he took a side quest down this little random road. Every time we'd walk past that road, because it takes us to and from the farm, he would stop and look at it and like ask a question about that road. And every time we went past it, I said, no, not today, mate. So I've kind of half walked down there and I think it goes nowhere. And also I've heard hunting down that direction. So
Ivan's been doing this exact thing.
Yeah. And then one day he went, can we? And I went, sure. You want to make the trail ride longer? That's fine with me. And we went down to the end. We got to the end and he said, it's muddy. I'm kind of sinking. I'm like, And he's like, there's no good grass here. Shit. And I went, no, there's not. And he went, I'll take this grass anyway. And he took that grass. And I went, okay, boring. There's nothing here. Can we go back? He was like, yep, okay, we'll go back now. And that was it.
Yeah. And even the beauty of him, like getting a seeking impulse online, it being enabled by you, not because it was like goal oriented and his seeking impulse was in service of like, and then we found a beautiful field and he must have known it. It
went nowhere.
The seeking impulse is about sometimes just seeking. Yeah. And then it's information that informs other decision making in the future. So I think this gets at another thing that is common across you and I, that if other people want to label as like a muscle they want to learn to flex a bit more, it's in reading things with complexity and with allowing for more points of information to influence the decision making, because the horses already have this. We're the ones that narrow it.
Yes.
So for us to keep opening. And that requires sometimes putting new cognitive frames on things, new labels on things. This is why I'm trying to throw out like different words or different like kind of, they're not ideological, but conceptual frames for things. Like read more poetry, look at different I'm interdisciplinary at my core.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a code switcher at my core. I'm promiscuous with my thinking. I'm
Mm.
promiscuous with my aesthetics. And it makes me not legible to most
Mm.
beings unless you are of the freaks and geeks variety, which are used to some kind of total weird collage pastiche of a person. And you can appreciate that mosaic of influences. But just to know this isn't just an aesthetic. This is a way of feeling and thinking into multiple inputs that begins to get us out of just our human
Mm.
way of being. To disrupt our humanness needs to be ongoing
Mm.
and to allow other ways of thinking, whether it's other cultures that we expose ourselves to, other gender ways of expressing yourself. But for me, my jam is other species and other consciousnesses. So that's I think what's common here.
I love you so much. I'm going to circle down the conversation because we're
Yeah.
going to wrap, because you and I, once we get going,
Expand.
yeah. And I'm laying already a very open invitation to you. If you feel up for it and desirous of it, to be a regular occurring
Oh,
guest with me here,
oh.
very, very, very selfishly on my behalf, because I would like to
Mm.
talk with you and meet your mind on a regular basis if I can, and present that with to the community if they so
Yeah.
wish to
If they're
listen.
into it.
If
Yeah.
they're into it, and maybe they're not, but that's okay. I'm into it. So I've got 3 little
Oh,
questions or
oh, cool.
segments
Yeah.
that I ground out the episodes with.
Yeah. We were in the formless and now we're going into the form.
Going
I'm here
into
for
form.
that.
Going into
Yeah.
form. First form is I'm inviting you to muck out with me.
Yeah.
What is something in the equestrian industry that makes you say, what the muck, and that you want to fling it into a wheelbarrow and compost it and then grow lovely things in it?
I thought we were trying to wrap up the conversation. I'll try to be succinct.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind, but so many other people are saying it, but I'm just going to say it quickly anyway. Turn out your goddamn horses.
Thank you.
There's so much that is forgivable if you just let them have the freedom of
Life.
space and freedom of body. That would be the easy low-hanging fruit. If I can have like a slightly more detailed one, I think it would be just what we were talking about. The horse community, because of its histories, is so rigid. And I just fear, even in our like more alternative realm, I just sense some of that rigidity coming back in new forms, even ethics itself being its own rigidity. I'm not saying I don't participate in that. I'm trying to break up my own inclinations to be like, this is how it is. This is how it should be. For my soul, that is boring. When I hear the word diversity, that is not just some identity politics. Let's put people with different colored sweaters on. It's diverse, like different flags, different countries. It's diverse. When I talk about diversity, I am talking about radical other ways of being in the world. So yes, turn out your horses, but also my like request to this alternative horse community is stay weird. Like just stay weird. Keep being weird, keep deterritorializing outside of the norm and creating new pathways out so we don't just congeal into a slightly different version of the rigid mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, I'll co-sign both of those. You know how I mentioned earlier that dominance kind of lays a trap, allows the horse to violate the boundary, and then punishes them for the violation. I'm
Yeah.
I'm concerned about that same tendency.
Yes.
And removing the punishment. So they still allow the boundary violation, and then when the animal gets there, they correct them until they go back outside, and then reward them for going back outside, but they allow them still to have the same problem of coming into a place that wasn't the horse's. and for you and I to say, why don't we just make sure that the horse is very clear about what the limits are in the first place, and that when they touch the limit, it never hurts, but it doesn't necessarily feed them either. It's just they feel that limit.
And even question our own limits.
And question our limits, and have dynamic limits. Dynamic limits, 4-dimensional dynamic limits.
If something keeps coming back as an escape, like what we might, there's like the most profound thinker for me right now in the world is a man named Bayo Akomolafe. And he talks about, I feel uncomfortable even bringing up this subject matter because I feel like it's not my place to necessarily talk about it. So with some allowance around that, he talks about how within like the history of American use of slaves, that the slave escaping from the proverbial plantation is still an act of the reinforcement of the power of the plantation, because they escape and then there's a bringing back in. And so it kind of furthers the reach of power even into the borderlands of the escape, so that escape isn't even possible, even conceptually. The idea of escape is already one that is the territory of the power. Yeah.
I'm going to be up at night with that thought.
And the only way I cannot keep becoming the despotic, tyrannical with just a new skin, new flavor, new
hat.
Yeah, like, look, I don't wear black tall boots. I wear like short brown boots. Like
I wear barefoot shoes now.
Yeah, I wear barefoot shoes, exactly. But I still am kind of just defining new limits. I'm not saying limitlessness. I'm just saying I wait for the phenomena to challenge me. I've gotten really clever around finding softer ways to bring horses' resistance, to lower their resistance and bring them back into the fold. And I've changed myself and my expectations in the process. But for that to be an honest endeavor, I have to keep being willing for even that to change. And I wait for each individual body. It might come through pathology, what we would call pathology. It might come through, like, even when people say, oh, is that horse lame? Like, that's not even how my brain works anymore. Because I already know that this thing we call lameness isn't, or even pathology, isn't something that just lives in the horse as an objective reality. It's a relational reality with what it is asked of, with the weather that day, with its environment, and so it's malleable. And so I rely on the limits now, the resistances, to just be the places where I myself might get altered, instead of me acting on the abhorrent thing, the deviant thing, the pathological thing, as the thing that needs to be remedied, even if my remedy is a softer remedy.
Yes.
So stay weird is really just the message around that, even if people didn't catch all that. Stay weird and be willing to be altered as much as we are trying to alter the horse, even in the name of good.
Yes. And on that, you are not weird to me. You are one of the most sane people I've spoken to this month.
Thank you.
In my opinion, it's a clear line for me when I hear you speak. Let's move into my second question, which is, how are you contributing to the tides of change in the equestrian industry, if you are contributing at all?
I honestly question whether I am contributing. And I think the commitment for me comes from not relying on knowing whether I'm actually making a difference or not. Because even if, and this is truly how I feel, because I don't have a huge following, and I know there's things I could do to help with that. My body just can't. You talked at the beginning about me dipping in, dipping out. That's my body.
Yes.
Or it's my nervous system. Like, it just is. It's my own commitment to my own flows, that it's not even a commitment because it's something bigger than me. So am I contributing? I think it's in just accepting that I might not be, and that this might actually be a very private enterprise between me and a few horses and a few humans. But I trust in this thing we were talking about, this non-localized consciousness, this morphic resonance, the morphic field. I trust that every drop in the bucket of, even if I just improve things with my partner, with my daughter, like I have good relations with my partner, I have good relations with my daughter. That is already really big. A lot of people don't. Some people hate their spouse, some people hate their children or have troubled relations. So that's already like I'm contributing something to the morphic field. With my horses, is it perfect? No, it's not. I'd love for it to be, but I come to them honestly and authentically, and always trying for it to be a mutual, reciprocal transformation of beings. So I trust that relationship is good. And beyond that, I have my slightly more concentric circles of clients outside of there. Questionable whether I'm actually changing things with them or not. But I think it's just trusting that I'm first trying to be in right relation with me and my body. And if I can do that, then hopefully each relationship outside of that, even though it might be a small circle, is contributing something to the larger
Yes.
field.
And do you know, that's been a common answer for a lot of folks so far, because I've got a lot of editing to do. I've been banking these conversations. And common thread is, I ain't trying to go outside my body and change that. I'm just trying to make my environment okay for me. And that is my contribution, because that's how I can influence. And it's
good. I'm glad I'm not alone with that.
You're very, very
it
much
feels so
the
small
same.
Sometimes.
It's a hot take. I'm going to say it's a trend alert for 2024 is to bring it back to your body. Bring it back. That's mine. I just closed my private booking schedule today because it's at 98% capacity until July. It's been 3 months booked out in advance. Lockie, close it down. Close it down. You're moving somewhere else. Close it down. 55, 65 people a week. Close it down. Bring it back. Bring it back.
Your concentric circles are bigger than mine.
But I wanted them. I chose that.
You have capacity for it.
Sometimes. Sometimes, but I watch you dip in and dip out, and I go, the future, it'll happen. It'll happen for me. And the last question for you today, Shannon, is, in the age of learning journeys, we seem to have forgotten that a journey is a journey if it comes home at some point. Otherwise, it is just homelessness. So what is home for you as a horsewoman in this age? What has been true for you, regardless what the journey has been? What have you always brought it back to?
Like I could say something trend alert, over trend alert. I could say something really meaningless at this point, like the body, right? But I will say that I think that even when I was doing not the alternative stuff, what was still present in there that is redeemable still in what I do now, it does have to do with the body. But it was really the felt sense of two bodies moving together and trying to turn points of contact that are resistant into points of contact that are fluid. I was in the mainstream world, and that's what made the whole process very addictive to me in a good way, of really just wanting to work on energies meeting and energies flowing together in non or ever lesser resistant ways. And the art of that has just gotten improved over time. And it's still, I have an edge that I'm always excavating with that. But that is what has been common all the way through. The felt sense of resistance and the felt sense of flow, and making a study of that. And I think that will always be my thing. It's my thing when sickness comes into my body. scanning it for resistances and flows in my relationship, in my land, the land, it's not mine. I mean, on paper it is. And then, of course, the horses, making a study of resistances and flows.
I love it. Thank you so much. I mean this truly. You've made my day. You really have made. I was having a very low day, so it's been wonderful for me to hear you, and I'm so grateful for you. And we're gonna.
I mean, it goes without saying that I too am so grateful for you. Your depth and richness of thought, of feeling, of vocabulary, of the whole thing. I mean, this is why I want community, because I want to engage with other beings who are opening up spaces and who can open up spaces in me. So your richness truly, truly, truly is just such a gift.
Thank you.
And thank you for including me in it. Yeah.
Of course. And I'm looking forward to, if you want, linking arms together again in the future. In this manner.
But what if I get weird?
Will
I still be accepted?
No, I speak fluent weird, and this is a safe place for weird, and it's a safe place for weird because anyone who is not safe around weird is not safe around me. I'll be really clear about that. Like the cool kids might have, given me a hard time, but there came a point when I was on television commercials in Australia, and then the cool kids suddenly were paying attention to me, and you best believe I let them have it. I eviscerated them to them for the pain that they had inflicted. And now you think you can no, back up. No, I'm going to go to Switzerland. Bye. That was my dip. My dip. And I've continued to dip since.
Modify that little disclaimer in your clinic info right beside Spurs. Get something in there about weird.
Weird. We need weird. That's actually not a bad idea. Thank you, Shannon. I wish you a lovely rest of your day. Bye. Bye.
Cheers.